morning. I'm Liesl and this is Mama T, and we're here in Idaho Falls, close to the zoo here, and it's late May. We're going to go through and find some flowers for flower essences.
That's right. And the first one we're going to start with is horse chestnut. There are two different types of chestnut trees. You have what is known as the sweet chestnut, and then you have horse chestnuts. Horse chestnuts are inedible as far as human beings are concerned, and for that matter, as far as horses are concerned too. It starts out with these beautiful leaves, which remind you of an open hand. When you look at the leaf, it reminds you a lot of a hand with the fingers stretched out. So sometimes they can call this palm leaf tree because it looks a lot like a hand out, waving fingers. So you notice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A red horse chestnut has pinkish red flowers, and a white chestnut has white flowers. There is a difference as far as the famous Bach remedies are concerned as to what the medicinal purposes of a white chestnut and a red chestnut is, as far as using it for, various and sundry purposes. But for what we're talking about right now, we're basically looking at how to gather it in the first place. You want to gather flower essences between 8 o'clock and noon as far as the essence of the plant is concerned. The reason for that is you want the flower to be at its strength. And so you'll notice even between the two flowers on this tree that I'm holding, one on the bottom, one on the top, you notice the one on the top is just starting to completely bud out. And that's basically the type of flower cluster that you want to pick from. That means then that the bees have not overworked it, and it means that the chemicals within the plant itself are at their strongest. Now there's various ways to do this, but I like the old school method, which is you just reach up, look carefully at the flower, making sure that it's wide open. So you're not going to pick the bud, you're going to pick the flower. You're going to pick the flower that has everything intact, so you look carefully, make sure there's no bruises, no browning or anything like that. Okay, hold it by its stem. Don't put your whole hand over the flower because that puts your oils on the flower. You want it as pristine as possible. The next thing that you're going to do is get a glass bottle. Make sure it's a nice clean glass bottle. So get one
bottle here.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So then what you're going to do is take your flower, put it within the bottle, get some non-tap water. That's important because the problem that a lot of people have when they make flower essences is that they need water that is not overly chlorinated.
Right.
So tap water, you can pretty much guess it's going to have some sort of chlorine or any other type of stuff that's antibacterial. So you're going to get just your cheap drinking water or distilled water. Some people argue back and forth on which one, and I noticed that either one works just as well. Okay. You're going to pour a little bit of water on the flower. You're not going to drown it, but you're going to give it enough so that the flower does not wilt. We're going to continue and finish this once we get into our place where we're going to actually prepare the essence. But the first thing that you're going to do is hydrate the flower enough so that it doesn't actually dry on you. Now, should you end up with your flowers getting dried, because you can do the homeopathic slash flower essence that Dr. Bach talks about, that's what we're doing. But you can also come back and pick the flowers, the foliage, and a little bit of the bark for the herbal remedy that this is used for. Horse chestnuts are mildly poisonous to the human system, so you're not going to eat this at all. Right. What you're going to do is take the leaves, take the nuts when they actually grow in the fall, and take the flowers and make a tincture out of it, and it's used topically for varicosity. So if you have varicose veins or spider veins, this is your number one go-to as far as that's concerned. And then it gets also used in Chinese medicine, but always topically. You don't want to eat or drink or do anything as far as putting this inside your body, because it's really not very good for you.
Now, how many blossoms do we put in this? I mean, when we're making a flower essence, and are we going to be filling this to the top?
No,
so
no,
we'll be, how much water will we end up doing, and how many blossoms do you recommend in this?
Well, most of the time when I'm doing this, I want to do at least about 3 blossoms. The reason why, I know that the purists among people who do Bach remedies say that you only use 1. But the reason why I do 3 is I think it makes the initial stalk stronger and you're able to cut it better. And I also do that just for a practical reason, because sometimes when you just use 1 blossom, if you find out later that maybe there's something wrong with it, then you got to go all the way back and pick more blossoms and all that. So I actually like doing 3 for that reason.
So let's go ahead and get 3 in here, I guess.
Okay, yeah, and again, you carefully examine the flower and make sure that it's fully open, no brown spots. And the way you check for brown spots is you look at the base of the flower and you carefully look and see no bruising, no breaking, anything like that. Sometimes if you really want to be purist about it, you wait till the bees come by and you watch and see which ones the bees actually go to. But you know, I don't think that's absolutely necessary. Now see, you see there's still a bud on there.
Right.
That means that these flowers are as fresh as you can get. So you turn them. And the other reason you do your turning and looking is you don't want to put an insect in there either. So there's number 2. And this one's acceptable. Good color. No bruising. Everything intact. Number 3.
Okay. So we've got 3 blossoms in there, and then we'll finish this later, right?
Yes.
Okay. This is a horse chestnut, right?
Yes.
So how long is this going to be in bloom, do you think?
Well, looking at the way that the weather is, you got bright blue skies, we've had rain, I'd say that these blossoms are pretty much going to be spent within the next 5 days.
Okay.
So this is one of the things about collecting flowers. You've got to make sure that you do it as quickly as possible. And it's all dependent upon the weather. It'd be nice if you could say on such and such a date, such a time, that's when the flowers are going to be there. But you just have to watch the weather. This is part of the fun and the frustration of foraging, because you know, on one hand you're like, oh, this is really great, but if you got to work, if it rains, you know, if there's a windstorm, if you have a really bad windstorm, a lot of your flowers are just going to be gone. So you just have to play it by ear, and as soon as you get a chance, you get out there and you do your foraging. And that's why, again, I pick more than 1 blossom, because right now these flowers look just fine, but if I'm not able to get back here until the middle of next week, these flowers are going to be gone, and then I have to wait a whole year in order to do it all over again. So I always tell students, get out there, pick while the picking is good. Now you notice with the sun falling directly on the tree and the blossoms, that's why you want to get your blossoms on a sunny day, because it brings out the chemistry of the flowers as much as possible. Dr. Bach always recommended that when you do your picking, that you want to pick the flowers that are touched by the sun, not the ones that are wilted. This is the reason why you go between 8 o'clock and noon, because once it gets to the heat of the day, the flowers start to wilt, and you get a chemical change in that. Here's the thing to remember about flower essences. There are 3 levels of an herb. The first level is the homeopathic essence of a flower or the plant. And that is something that affects brain chemistry and has to do with people's moods and problems they might be having on what we call a soul area. That's the mind and the emotions. So those are subtle, carefully made, and given with over a period of time. You don't expect the flower essence to work right away. Now, when I come back and I start picking the leaves, or I start picking the nuts or even the flowers later on, I'm not going to take one or two. I would take the whole flowering that you have on this particular branch. Now, that's the second level. That's a physical level. If I'm going to make something for a tincture or lotion for varicosity, I'm going to do that to actually cause a change on a physical level, shrinking of the veins, things like that. And then the third way that you can deal with flowers or with plants is just aromatherapy. Now, I don't think that there is aromatherapy, at least when I've researched it. I've never found one for horse chestnut, mostly because there's no aroma.
Yeah.
Now, some people will argue that all flowers have an aroma. Maybe we as humans may not pick up on it, but certainly the bees do. Bees navigate by color, and they're drawn to a plant or a flower by color and by smell. And so a lot of times you see a bee working a flower because they have those compound eyes. They're picking up things we can't see.
Right.
So the argument among chemists is they're also picking up odors that we can't smell either. And that might well be true, but I believe that the subtle odor we're not picking up is the flower essence. In other words, when you're preparing this as a flower essence, this is exactly what you're trying to pick up. You're picking up the essence of the flower on a chemical basis that maybe you can't perceive, but your brain will.
Right.
Okay? And so when we get back to the shop, that's one reason I want to talk a little bit, not only about what you do with horse chestnut, but how flower essences work. Because a lot of times people will say, well, that's just stupid. You know, it's so diluted and it's so subtle. How can that possibly affect people? So we're going to talk a little bit about that.
Okay, great. Let's move on.
One of the interesting things about white chestnuts as opposed to red horse chestnuts has to do with the way that the flower looks, and also the fact that there is an actual smell with white horse chestnut flowers. And it's what I guess most botanists would say is a typical wildflower smell. Slightly sweet, a little bit pungent, and the idea being that as the flower grows, it sends out its scent, and then it attracts insects that come and pollinate it. This is the reason why white chestnuts get worked first, and this is also the reason why they have a smell, which is as the bees are flying around trying to replenish themselves after wintering, then these flowers come out. They're very generous flowers. In other words, you get clusters of blossoms and they smell, and the bees are attracted to them and work them first. Then they come back and then they work the red chestnut. The bee that we have a picture of is a scout bee. How can you tell? Because it's all by herself. See, bees work in groups, and so what she was doing was flying there and basically testing the pollen, testing the nectar. She'll go back to the hive, and as everybody knows, bees do their little dance so they can tell where they're going to be going. And I guarantee you, in a matter of hours, I'll come back to that red chestnut, and there'll be bees everywhere, because she would have gone back and said, okay, it's ready, we need to go. Or if she's looking at the buds, she'll say, oh no, we're going to have to wait a couple of days.
So now you were saying how the difference
okay.
between the red and the white.
Okay.
As far as medicinal value?
Okay. As far as the flower essence is concerned, the difference between the two is horse chestnuts as a Bach flower remedy. It's often used for depression, but it's depression of a certain type. There are many flower essences that are used for what they used to call in the old days melancholia. Melancholia is, I guess the way we would understand it, is bipolar. Sometimes you're down, sometimes you're up, okay? So melancholia is supposed to be a cyclic, sort of up and down problem with depression. When you use white chestnut, what that's used for, and here we go, we'll talk about that again later, but one of the things of looking at it is this looks like a brain. If you look at it, here is the stem, which is the brain stem going down into the spine. If you rotate it around, what the people would notice, the herbalists would notice, is it looks like a brain. And people might say, well, how do they know about brainstem? It's called war, okay? So when you have war and severe injuries, people got to see what the brain looked like. Now, although people did not quite understand the way that the brain works, they did notice that a lot of mania and a lot of problems that people had seemed to be affected as far as the head was concerned. So this is supposed to be a remedy that works well for people who have long-term melancholia. In other words, they're depressed most of the time. So they're not up and down. They're basically down most of the time. And this is supposed to relieve brain pressure as far as depression and heaviness of head. Okay, because here's what they look at. They say, okay, if you look at the top, see how the blossoms are standing straight up? Then look at the blossoms as they get worked. They're starting down. So they look at this and they say, it's for people who are pulled down in their brain chemistry. We say brain chemistry, they say melancholia. So this is a person who tries to feel up, but most of the time struggles with being pulled down. I guess we'd say clinical depression maybe, okay?
Hey, we've enjoyed being with you this morning, learned some really great herbs. Mama T is fantastic. We would like for you to subscribe, and if you can, to Red Clover Channel. You can also see our videos on redcloverbs.com, and we would love for you to be a patron of our new Red Clover Channel. And if you would like, there's a link below that takes you there, and lots of cool extras that we'll have there that nobody else can see, and just for you. So thank you and happy herbing.